Next up is momentum, another important concept when it comes to price pattern behavior. So momentum is really when price moves up, down, or sideways with two types of momentum. The first type is accelerating momentum, and the next is decelerating momentum. So accelerating momentum is really an increase in velocity, and decelerating momentum is a decrease in velocity. So let me show you a visual of what this really looks like. So we'll start with accelerating. So again, that's an increase in velocity. Now, we usually see this in the form of candlestick charts of taller or more expanded range candlesticks. So here's some examples. Notice these candlesticks are tall and, could be either blue or red, doesn't matter. It's just the tallness or the height of the range of those candles. That means there's some accelerating buying pressure or accelerating selling pressure. And usually you'll see the fullness of the color of the candlestick, meaning the body of the candlestick is very full. The wick or tails of the candlestick are usually pretty small in relation to the body of the candle, and the bodies are going to be tall. The total range from wick to wick will be tall as well. And then here's another example, a big, tall red candle. So a lot of selling pressure going on there. And then here's one where we have a large bodied, blue-bodied candle right there. So a lot of buying pressure on that. And then here we can see big red candle with a gap down and another big red candle. So a lot of selling pressure going on that one there. So that's some accelerating selling pressure going on. And then on the other side, we have decelerating or decrease in velocity. Usually we'll see that in the form of a shorter or narrow range candlestick. So here's some examples in gray. The bodies are typically much smaller and the range is typically smaller as well, although not always. As on this one here, that blue one has a decent sized range to it, but the body is quite small. And then here's one. These are little doji candles where the open and close is the same price, much smaller range on that one. And then here we can see some small, narrow range candles as well with narrow, small bodies on that also. Just smaller candles, in other words, shorter candles, smaller range. And then here's some down here as well. When you have the bodies of those candles pretty small, but the wicks are maybe a little, tall on either side of it, or, you see definite wicks there with a small body. Oftentimes that is a deceleration of momentum happening, even though there's a lot of range going on there. There's a lot of indecisiveness in commitment from either the buyers or the sellers. So something else to look at. Okay, so let me show you a different perspective of momentum. So for example, here we're looking at a monthly chart. All right, so each candle is 1 month worth of time or trading time. Now, in this monthly chart, we can see overall it's an upward movement or a rally in price. And we see some big expanded range candles. We also see some more smaller range candles too at the bottom left there. All right, now, if we look at it from a different perspective, in this case, the weekly chart, we can see, it's still that upward direction. That's not going to change. But now the candlesticks do change, don't they? All of a sudden now, we definitely still see these expanded range candles, the tall candles, but we also see some shorter candles as well. More of them, in fact. But we still see the overall upward direction. So my point here is that you will see all sorts of different candle bodies and wicks and tails and heights and, expanded range candles, narrow range candles. You're going to get all sorts of different types of candlestick shapes and sizes and all that type of stuff. Look at the big picture here. It's going up. The direction is up. The momentum is heading in an upward direction with overall large range candles on the monthly and quite a few on the weekly as well. But now watch this. I'm going to show you a daily chart. Now it looks quite a bit different, doesn't it? Look at how many more smaller range or narrow range candles there are. And there's gaps and there's some expanded range candles in there as well. But you get a lot more going on that daily chart. Well, it's that same month period time frame. You just see a lot more candles. So we have, over the course of several months here, we see the monthly chart, the weekly chart, and the daily chart. just a different perspective, but they're all headed in that upward direction. So, if you're looking at a daily chart, you're like, well, what's going on here? And if you can't figure it out, well, sometimes you can just look at the weekly or the monthly chart to see the direction that it's going, if that helps you. All right, so when we look at it from just one single candlestick on the monthly, so I've highlighted that here in the gray rectangle, and if we just isolate that 1 month, let's look at it on the weekly chart. Well, it's that week right there. So we have, a big blue candle, then it gaps up, then we have a couple smaller candles after that, and then another fairly good sized blue candle. So that week, or those several weeks there, is what you see in that monthly chart. A big move up, in other words. On the daily chart, it looks like this. More of a typical uptrend, higher highs and higher lows going on. So really, when we look at this uptrend on the daily chart, the higher highs and higher lows, and certainly got quite a few gap ups and some small narrow range candles, and you got a whole lot going on here from different shapes and sizes of candlesticks. But really just step back for a moment and see, well, all that is on the weekly chart is a gap up, and then it continues going higher. Or in the monthly chart, it's a big blue candle, big, tall, expanded range blue candle. So oftentimes people will look at the chart and they just get confused. Like, I don't know, what's the chart telling me? What's it saying? What's going on here? Sometimes when you break it down into these different time frames, it makes it a little easier to understand and just simply say, hey, the monthly chart is a big blue candle. That means there's an uptrend on the daily chart. Or if you look at a daily chart and say there's an uptrend, all that really means is you're going to see a big, tall blue candle on the monthly chart. Okay. And then, of course, vice versa. If you've got a downtrend on the daily chart, you're going to see a red candle on the monthly chart and so on. All right. So anyways, that's just a different way of looking at it. Next up, let's take a look at one more way of how we can view price pattern behavior. So go ahead and continue on to the next lesson.